Whether it's a beautiful palace or whether it's a simple little leaf or flower, it is the affection that gives anything its value to the heart. So Nandotsava was the ultimate festival of affection, where everyone was showing their love for each other by celebrating and sharing their love for Krishna. And it was beautiful. And our beloved Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, he appeared in this world on that day of Nandotsava, when everyone was celebrating together the festival of love, the festival of welcoming Krishna into our hearts and into the world, where everyone was blissfully chanting the holy names. Soon after, Nanda Maharaj went to pay taxes to Kamsa. Because after all, Kamsa was the ruling king over all other kings. He was the emperor. He did all the tax stuff indirectly. In a secret place, Nanda Maharaj met Vasudeva. This was just before Vasudeva was put back in prison. Vasudeva told Nanda Maharaj that you should go back soon, because you have to take care of these two precious children that are under your care. Meanwhile, when Krishna was just a few days old, Kamsa had already changed his mind. And when he understood that the child that was meant to kill him was already born somewhere else, he called for some of his allies to help him. Now this is 5,000 years ago, before Kali Yuga really set in. Yogis can use their power for the greatest good or to perform the most terrible deeds. One such yogini, her name was Putana. She was a Rakshashi. She had incredible supernatural powers. She could fly in the sky. And her passion in life was to eat the flesh and drink the blood of human babies. She was in outer space, and she came down to Gokul. And by her power, she transformed her body into a most beautiful looking lady. She looked so beautiful. It was something that was not even of this earth. It must be some heavenly damsel, or it might even be the goddess of fortune. That's what everyone was thinking. And Putana, in this disguised form, walked right into Nanda Maharaj's house, where Yashoda and Rohini were sitting with little Gopal. Why nobody even checked her? Because they thought she must be some expansion of Lakshmi that has come to bless our child. Let her bless him. But her intent was to murder the baby. She looked at baby Krishna, and in her heart something spoke to her, that this tiny little child is death personified. And little baby Krishna looked at her and closed his eyes, because she was coming in the role of a mother to kill him. And as he looked at her, he was thinking, she has killed and eaten the flesh of so many innocent babies in Gokul and all around the world. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains that she was like a razor-sharp sword in a very decorated silken sheath. She picked up little baby Gopal in front of everyone, and everyone was happy about this. She had placed upon her breast a deadly poison that could kill hundreds of grown men. And pretending to have motherly love for the child, she stuck her breast at Krishna's mouth to kill him. Krishna sucked. He was only a few days old, and he didn't look any older than that. When Krishna wants to suck, he can do it like no other. He sucked and sucked so intensely that first he drank her milk, then he drank all the poison, then he drank all the milk, and then he started drinking her very life force from her body. And she was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. It was causing her so much pain. And then just to increase the experience of purification with Krishna's tiny, tiny little infant fingers. You've all seen the fingers of an infant? They look so soft and they look so delicate. You're almost afraid that if you even look at it, it may hurt it. Those little tiny fingers, which were like newly sprouted leaves from a tamal tree, they squeezed Putana, and she felt agonizing pain. She was, with all of her strength, she was trying to rip this child away from her, but he was sucking and squeezing, and she screamed out, "Leave me, child, leave me, leave me!" And she ran outside, ran into the pasture, and assumed a gigantic form to try to counteract Krishna. Her form was 12 miles high. Now you may say impossible, only because you can't do it. But for one who has these supernatural mystical powers, it's as possible as you sneezing or coughing like so many of you are doing today. So in this gigantic 12-mile form, Krishna was the same size, and she was, with all of her supernatural prowess, trying to rip Krishna off, and Krishna just kept sucking, 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 until finally her eyes were just reeling in pain, and she fell to the ground dead. And she broke a lot of trees. And Krishna was just playing. And when the gopis saw this, Mother Yashoda, she was in utter anguish when suddenly this beautiful lady expanded like this. And the gopis ran up and they found Krishna on this giant hill of her breast, just going around and playing around and smiling and laughing. He could hardly even crawl. He was just like there. And they brought her back to Yashoda Mai. Soon after, Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men came back from Mathura, and on their way back, they saw this gigantic form. To walk around her would take about 3.5 hours. She was huge. And when Nanda Maharaj found out what happened, he was thinking, Vasudeva must be some sort of a prophet. He warned me that I should get back soon because some dangers may befall Krishna and Balaram. So they chopped up her body and burned it. And as they burned it, the smoke that came was the sweetest, most nectarine fragrance of incense. Because after Krishna sucked out her poison, he completely purified her, and her body became his Mahaprasad. Because he drank the milk from her body, so her body became Mahaprasad. And not only that, but the Srimad Bhagavatam, Uddhava, and the greatest acharyas, they all declare that Krishna gave Putana the liberation of being his own motherly nurse in Goloka Vrindavan in this spiritual world. This is Krishna's love. He liberated her from her misdeeds. The little bit of pain she suffered while he was squeezing and sucking cleansed her of all of the sins that she had ever committed and all of the sinful tendencies in her heart. But because she offered Krishna, even in a demoniac way, she offered him the service of a mother. In the very end, at that last moment before she died, Krishna awakened in her heart motherly affection. And she was given this supreme liberation of being an eternal motherly nurse of Krishna in ecstatic love in this spiritual world. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that these different demons that Krishna killed in Vrindavan represent obstacles on the path of pure bhakti. Putana represents a false, cheating spiritual teacher or guru. It may appear that they're giving us nourishing milk, but if their own concoctions, speculations, or vices are mixed in it, it's like poison. So we must be very careful to receive transcendental knowledge from pure sources. Meanwhile, Srimad Bhagavatam explains every aspect of a child's life in Vedic culture is celebrated. Srila Prabhupada tells us there's happiness in family life according to the Vedic spiritual culture. Children are not considered a burden. They're considered a gift of God. When a child is so many months old, the Garbhadan samskara, at the time of conception, there's a certain type of celebration and purificatory process. At the time when the child is just starting to grow in the womb, there's another type of blessing and auspicious celebration for the child. And when the baby is about 3 months old and just starts on its own to turn over and slant itself just before crawling, it's called the Uttana. And when Yashoda Mai saw Krishna starting to kind of get up and slant himself, she told Nanda Maharaj, and Nanda Maharaj called the Brahmins, and the whole of Vrindavan came to celebrate that little Gopal is starting to get up. Haribol! So there was kirtans, and there was yagyas, and there was musical instruments, and Yashoda and Nanda, they were giving gifts Because if you want to get blessings, the greatest way to receive is in the culture that they were from, the Brijabasis, they would give cows to Brahmins. And each cow would have gold-plated hooves and gold-plated horns and beautiful, beautiful silk embroideries around their bodies, and sometimes pearl and jeweled necklaces. Because the more you can give, the more blessings are going to naturally come from their hearts. Because when God sees, when Krishna sees that we're doing something very special for those he loves, Krishna blesses us infinitely. So while the celebration was going on, little Gopal seemed to get really tired. So Mother Yashoda, she wanted to make him happy. So she wanted to put him to sleep. And little babies like this, 3 months old, they feel most protected when with their mothers. So she wouldn't just put Krishna to sleep. She would lay beside Krishna and embrace him, so that little Gopal felt complete shelter of the love of his mother, and then he would go to sleep. And she left him under a big cart that was carrying all sorts of utensils. According to Jiva Goswami, it was a very big cart. And then she went, because there were so many guests that she had to receive, and she was doing seva, serving all the people there. And she had some little children watching to make sure Krishna was all right. And little Gopal felt hungry for Yashoda's milk, so he cried. And as he cried, this tiny little flower lotus foot kicked, just very sweet little kick. But our Acharyas tell us from the Srimad Bhagavat that another demon asura of Kamsa had come to Gokul. His name was Shakatasura. He was a ghost. He had no gross body. And such ghostly beings, they try to enter into another body to haunt people and to create havoc in the world. He especially wanted to kill Krishna. So he took the opportunity from the sky and he entered into the body of this cart. And Krishna knew that. And very innocently, he just went with his foot and he kicked the wheel of the cart, and in touching it, the entire cart flew up into the sky. It was shocking, inconceivable. The wheel was broken, it ripped off its axis, its axle, the spokes were torn to shreds, and the whole cart came tumbling down. And all the utensils were pouring on the ground. It made a tumultuous sound. And when Nanda and Yashoda and everybody heard this, they came running to the scene. And there's little Gopal just smiling, surrounded by this whole massive scenario of broken up stuff. And Shakatasura, not only did he destroy the cart, but he liberated Shakatasura and sent him back to the liberated state. He gave him mukti. Meanwhile, the Brijabasis, they were wondering, how did this happen? A thunderbolt of light over a sudden this cart was destroyed. And how is it that Krishna wasn't harmed? He was right under it. And the little boys who were watching, they say, we can tell you exactly what happened. Little Gopal kicked it and it flew up in the air and fell down and crashed. And the adults said, how could we believe these little children? This is not possible. When Putana was killed, liberated, when Shakatasura was also, the loving parental affection that the Brijabasis had for Krishna, he just would not allow them to think God, because it would interfere with the intimacy of how they served him and loved him. So by the Yogamaya potency, by the spiritual potency that covers a person's awareness of Krishna's supremacy, of his all-powerful nature, they just see him as their little beloved child. So they were thinking, it must be because we have worshipped the Supreme Lord, and because our child is so pious that he is protecting him. And Yashoda Mai took little Krishna and she embraced him. Oh, somehow or other you escaped death once again. And it's a symptom that a child is in good consciousness when he sucks the mother's milk very enthusiastically. So Krishna sucked it and Yashoda Mai was very, very happy. Shakatasura represents the mentality of holding on to our old bad habits. It's like a demon in our mind. Just like this cart had so much stuff on it, and ultimately all that stuff came crashing down for the purpose of killing Krishna. So similarly, our bhakti, our Krishna in our hearts, we have to be very careful to protect it from this cart with all this utensils and stuff in the form of the bad habits of our past that we hold on to. Bhoktaram jagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhradam sarvabhutanam gyatvam shantim richchati. The Bhagavad Gita explains we can become peaceful if we just understand three things. That Krishna is the supreme proprietor of everything that exists. That Krishna is the ultimate enjoyer of everything and everyone. And Krishna is the most intimate, loving, well-wishing friend. But our past bad habits, we want to be the proprietor. We want to be the controller. We want to be the enjoyer. And as everyone knows in this world, it's very difficult to break bad habits. Shakatasura was a ghost. Sometimes our old bad habits, like ghosts, they come back even 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, 80, 100 years, even lifetimes later to haunt us. There's only one way to actually deal with that. Tani saravani samyamya yukta asita matpara. Krishna tells in Gita, we must somehow or other restrain ourselves from these old tendencies of ours. And at the same time, we have to fix our mind on Krishna. If we can use whatever we have learned, whatever we know from the past, in Krishna's service, in a favorable, positive way, then we purify those habits. And bad habits become completely transcendental forms of devotional service. But when this selfish, envious attitude, which is so much the foundation of materialistic bad habits, when we allow them to come back to haunt us, they could cause havoc in our lives. Srila Prabhupada explains the way to give up bad habits is to replace them with good habits. We all want to find pleasure. Find pleasure in serving Krishna, in serving each other for Krishna. Parama Karuna Pahundui Jana Nitai Gora Chandra Kevala Ananda Kanda. Lord Chaitanya came with such a simple process that is joyful. By taking nice prasad, by associating in devotional ways with beautiful people, satsang, by dancing in kirtan, by rendering loving service, by seeing the beautiful form of the deity, by hearing Krishna's beautiful pastimes, and especially we can purify our heart and literally inundate our minds with transcendental happiness through chanting the holy name. Nanda Maharaj, in order to bestow good fortune on Krishna after this apparent calamity, Brahmins who he and he understood them as truthful and had them chanting mantras and performing yajnas for Krishna. Soon after this, Vasudeva secretly called his family priest, Gargamuni, and said, please go to Gokul and perform the name-giving ceremony and bestow auspiciousness upon these two children, Rohini's child and Yashoda's child. So incognito, Gargamuni came to Gokul. Nanda Maharaj was so happy to receive him. He said, great people like you, sadhus, you come to the households of people like us, you come in the guise like beggars, but actually your motivation is only to liberate us by giving us your association and transcendental knowledge. But now that you're here, let us take this opportunity to bless the two children through the name-giving ceremony. Gargamuni said, I warn you, if Kamsa finds out that myself, a leading priest of the Yadu dynasty, is doing a name-giving ceremony for your children here in Mahavan, he's going to know for certain that the child that's meant to kill him is here, and he's going to harass you. Nanda Maharaj said, but still, we don't want to lose this opportunity of your blessings. We'll do it secretly. We will not tell anyone. We'll have the name-giving ceremony without any celebration in the shed where we keep the cows. Gargamuni performed the ceremony. And he said, this child of Rohini and Vasudeva, because he will give ecstatic spiritual pleasure wherever he goes. His name will be Rama. Because he will display incredible spiritual strength, his name will be Baladev. And because he's united, Devamita had two children, Sura and Parjanya. They became two dynasties, the dynasties of Mathura and the dynasties of Madhuban, Vasudevananda. Because this child is bringing these two families together, his name will be Shankarshan. And as far as this other child, according to the scripture and according to the transcendental vision of the great sages and my astrological calculation, I can tell you that this child takes birth in every one of the yugas with different colors and different attributes. He has appeared in a white color in Satya Yuga. He has appeared in a yellow, in a red color. He's appeared in a golden yellowish color, and now he's appearing in this bluish dark color like a monsoon cloud. This child, he will bring about all auspiciousness and awaken the greatest happiness in everyone's hearts. He has many names because he performs so many incredible pastimes. In fact, in the past, he was the son of Vasudeva, so one of his names is Vasudeva. He will be the liberator of many demons, asuras. And I want to tell you, this child, he comes to this world to attract the hearts of everyone. He's extraordinary. His qualities are every bit as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. Please be very careful to take care of him. After Gargamuni left, little Krishna and Balaram started to crawl. As they crawled, they enchanted the hearts of everyone in Mahavan. Little Krishna and Balaram, they would crawl around like little snakes with their legs dragging behind them, their arms struggling to go forward, and they would crawl through the dirt that was mixed with cow dung and cow urine, and their parents would pick them up and embrace them and bathe them, and everyone would come just to watch little Krishna Balaram crawl. There was no greater pleasure to anyone's hearts than this, because Krishna's all attractive. Today, to find some pleasure, people go to cricket games or football games, or they go to movies, or they watch television, and to get better pleasure, they get bigger televisions and bigger televisions and flat screen televisions and round screen televisions. People go to natural sceneries, to the mountains or to the rivers or to the waterfalls, and people in the mode of passion, you know what they look at. People in the mode of ignorance, they're taking intoxications. There are so many ways people are trying to find pleasure in this world. But in Vrindavan, when you love Krishna, just seeing Krishna crawl is the fulfillment of every desire that you could possibly have. It's infinite pleasure, because Krishna's all attractive. Yes, he could lift the Govardhan hill with the little finger of his left hand and hold this gigantic mountain on the tip of his finger for 7 days and 7 nights. And Krishna could give the same pleasure to his devotees by learning how to crawl. Little Krishna and Balaram, they were crawling around, and sometimes, because they were always on the ground, they would hear ankle bells. because both of their mothers, Rohini and Yashoda, would wear these ankle bracelets. One day, Krishna was about 1 year old. There was a beautiful festival for Krishna. And Yashoda Mai was holding Krishna. And at that time, Kamsa had sent another mystical demon of the name Trinavarta. He came in the form of a whirlwind. And he especially wanted to kill Krishna and Krishna. You see, when God appears in the world, he doesn't need to perform any mystical practices to become God. Always God. Even when he's a little baby, he has all the powers of the absolute truth. So he did not want to subject Yashoda to what Trinavarta was about to do. So he became very heavy. And Yashoda Mai was thinking, how is Krishna all of a sudden, he's so heavy, he seems like he's getting heavy like the universe. And she put little Krishna down and she was wondering, why, what's happened? And naturally she took shelter of the Supreme Lord for the Lord's protection. She went back to perform her duties when Trinavarta, he started roaring, this wind. It was deafening to everyone. It was such a cyclone storm that dust rose from the ground and nobody could see anything around them. There wasn't a single person, cow, animal, or anyone that could even see their own body, what to speak of anyone else. The dust blinded them, and the roar of the storm was hideous. And everybody was just scattering around. They didn't know what to do, where to go. They didn't know where they were. And meanwhile, Yashoda Mai was just frantically, she was trying to find Krishna, but she couldn't see anything. And meanwhile, Trinavarta picked up little baby Krishna and went higher and higher and higher into the sky with him. And when the dust cleared, Yashoda Mai ran to the place she left Krishna, and he wasn't there anymore. She was looking, everyone was searching everywhere. She was in so much anguish. She fell unconscious with a cry like a cow that had just lost her calf. Trinavarta went higher and higher, higher, way high into the sky with little Gopal. His intention was to kill him. But Gopal was having a real fun time because he was getting the most incredible panoramic view of Braj Bhumi from up there. And not only that, he was getting a ride. You know how children like to take rides? Well, he was taking such a ride, so Krishna was actually enjoying. But then when he got so high, he decided enough of this. Little Gopal, to his mother, he became very heavy. To Trinavarta, he became light as a piece of grass, so he could go higher and higher in the sky. Then he got heavier and heavier and heavier until Trinavarta could not hold him any longer, and Trinavarta was trying to push him off. But little baby Krishna, this gigantic asura, he wrapped his little tiny arm around Trinavarta's neck. On to him, and Trinavarta was trying to push him off, and Krishna squeezed, and he was choking him. And ultimately, he choked Trinavarta, and Trinavarta, his eyes bulged, he couldn't breathe, and he fell down on the ground on this massive slab of stone, and all of his limbs were dislocated. And the gopis ran and brought Krishna back to Yashoda. And she bathed him and wiped the dust from him, fed him her milk. And they had all sorts of auspicious rituals to protect Krishna for the future. How is it the Lord could perform such supernatural deeds and not one single person in all of Gokul suspected that he was anything other than their helpless little loving child, who somehow or other, due to karma and due to God's grace, he was always being saved. Srinavarta represents the false pride of material scholarship. Being very learned can be a great attribute. Knowledge is one of the opulences of Krishna. But if it causes us to become proud, the perspective is totally undone. It is contradictory. Is if we could actually have transcendental knowledge like the Goswamis we were speaking about yesterday and the day before. But if that knowledge is actually being properly assimilated and realized, it will make us more and more humble. Amanina manadena. Trinadapi sunichena taror iba sahishnana. Amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. To be humble like a blade of grass. To be forgiving and tolerant like a tree. To offer all respect to others and not to expect or demand respect for oneself. That is true knowledge. Because that is the knowledge that attracts God. Knowledge without good qualities is useless. When the Digvijay Pandit Keshava Kashmiri came to Navadvip, he came boasting how no one could defeat him. He was attracting followers, attracting fame, and he was enjoying so much ego. And when the young students told Nimai Pandit about him, no one has ever been able to answer his questions. There's no question that he cannot answer. He's defeated every scholar in the world. It is said that the goddess manifests on his tongue every time he speaks. Nimai Pandit is the Lord. If you don't praise the Lord, nothing has any value. He said, a person is free with fruits. Because of the heaviness of those fruits of good qualities, such a person is always bowing down to respect others.